If we were not embarrassed by the fact that humans are so frail, we would be egomaniacs.
The topic of our conversation today is how does the clothing that we wear affect our lives, or the lack of affect our lives and the world around us. And the reason I'm asking is because this Sunday I visited the city, and which I have not done in the longest time, Times Square in particular. And I will start with the extreme. People are walking around naked. I mean, really naked. And it's allowed these days, apparently. The police is there, and there's no such thing anymore as indecent exposure or anything like that. This is allowed. And of course, yes, there's children there and everything. And my question is, how is this affecting our lives today? What is going on? Is it something we should be very concerned about?
What do you think? Instinctively, does it feel like a good thing or a bad thing?
Crazy thing, insane thing, abnormal thing. I don't know. But again, this is my perception. I mean, apparently it's not everybody's perception.
So let's think about this for a minute. Adam and Chava ate from the tree of knowledge, and they were embarrassed by their nakedness, and they got dressed. Or they covered themselves with something. By eating from a tree of knowledge, they became ashamed of their nakedness. The simple conclusion is that if you have knowledge, you're ashamed. If you don't have knowledge, you're not ashamed. And this knowledge is not academic. I mean, it's not like they read a bunch of books and became scientists. This knowledge means wisdom, maturity. If you're wise and mature, you are ashamed of your nakedness. If you're not wise or not mature, then you're not ashamed of your nakedness. Like children. Obviously, children are not ashamed. They haven't developed the wisdom or the maturity to have shame, to blush. So back in 1991, I gave out a book called Doesn't Anyone Blush Anymore? That was a long time ago. And already it became obvious that people are losing the blushing reaction or reflex. Why do we blush? Because we're embarrassed, we're ashamed. What is that instinct? What is that? Are animals ashamed? Do animals blush? I don't know. But humans definitely do. What is that? A good thing or a bad thing? Do you imagine if we never felt shame? Would that make us more human or less human? In practical language, would that make us easier to get along with or harder to get along with? Now you might think a person who never blushes, who is never ashamed, they're so easy to get along with. They never get embarrassed. You don't have to watch what you're saying because they won't take offense and they'll never be embarrassed. It's a pleasure to be with them. On the other hand, they'll embarrass you all the time because they don't know what it means to be ashamed. So what is this shame reflex? That's really what we need to consider. Now, some people, very liberal, will say, there's no such reflex. It's culture. You were taught to be ashamed. You were taught to be embarrassed. But really, there is nothing ever to be ashamed of, and there is nothing ever to be embarrassed by. No, that's not true. You can't fool people into a biological reaction. Shame is a biological reaction. You can't make it up. You can convince people what there is to be ashamed of. Like, some people will blush deeply if it turns out that they don't understand how the stock market works. That would be very embarrassing to some people. To other people, not embarrassing. I don't know the stock market. I don't care. But if I don't know the 10 Commandments, oh, will I blush. So culture, nurture can convince me what should make me blush. But the blush instinct is pure nature, not nurture. So what is that instinct? Why do we have that? So I guess we can break it down to 3 kinds of shame or embarrassment. Like, for example, you're walking down the street and you slip on a banana peel or on the ice, and you fall flat on your back, and all the people standing around are laughing, which is cruel. You're going to blush. You're going to be terribly embarrassed. What caused the shame? Your fragility. You're so fragile. You're so easily knocked off your feet by a banana peel. So what is it that has been hurt or compromised? Your ego, your human dignity. In other words, the frailty of human condition has been exposed. You can actually argue that if you ever slip on a banana peel, there's no reason for you to be ashamed. Is there a human being in the world who would not slip if he stepped on a banana peel? Is that some kind of personal failure on your part? No, that's a human being. If you walk on ice, you're going to slip. If you walk on water, you're going to drown. Don't be ashamed of it. It's the human condition. But sometimes when our humanity, meaning our limitations, are exposed, we blush. Yes, it's a human condition. It's embarrassing. That's one kind of embarrassment. Another kind of embarrassment is you're looking for somebody in their room, in their office, and you walk into the door and you realize it's the wrong room. You walked into the wrong door. Oh, you're going to blush. Why? You crossed a border that you should not have crossed. You stepped into something you shouldn't have stepped into. In other words, you find yourself where you don't belong. You're out of place. That takes many, many forms. Like you offer an opinion and you realize you don't know what you're talking about. Well, you stepped through it and now you're embarrassed because you shouldn't have gone there. Don't argue with Einstein about relativity. So that's another form of embarrassment. It's not human frailty. It's an inappropriateness. There's nothing inappropriate about slipping on a banana peel. It's not like, oh, you shouldn't have done that. You should. So they're very different causes of embarrassment. The banana peel is perfectly natural, but sometimes nature is embarrassing because it shows how vulnerable we are. Walking through the wrong door, that's a mistake. Pay attention. Know where you're going. And if you don't, well, you're embarrassed. You walked into the wrong. Then there's a third embarrassment, and that is guilt. I misbehaved. I did something I was not allowed to do. Walking into the wrong door is not a sin. It's not immoral behavior. It's just not where you belong. But then there's the guilt feeling. I did what I should not have done. I violated a law, not a border. These are three very distinct kinds of shame. Now, imagine if we didn't have those reactions. Would we still be human beings? No, we would be monsters. You poke your head into every door you walk by, you're not a human being. You'll cross any border, you have no sense of propriety. You offer opinions on things you know nothing about. You'll walk off with things that don't belong to you, aside from the crime aspect. You don't know where you belong. You don't know your place. That's a form of insanity. The sages say a person who sleeps in a cemetery is crazy, can be considered insane and not guilty or liable for their behavior. Sleeping in a cemetery, what's so terrible? It's not ghosts and goblins. You have no sense of where you belong, where things are appropriate. If you laugh at a funeral or cry at a bar mitzvah, you're out of place. You have no bearings. You don't know where you are. If we didn't notice those things, would we be human? Hardly. If we were not embarrassed by the fact that humans are so frail, we would be egomaniacs. There were people like that in history who thought they were literally God and that they could not be killed. They went into battle believing that they're immortal. Is that sane? So if you're not a little embarrassed just by the human condition, then you're out of your mind. You're out of touch with reality. And if being caught misbehaving doesn't embarrass you, then you're a sociopath. You accept no rule, well, then you can't live among people. You're not fit for civilization. So these things are not weaknesses. Blushing is not a curse. It's what makes us human. And isn't it interesting how the Torah tells us everything we need to know? It's all there. What was the first emotion described for human beings in the Torah?
Embarrassment.
Mm-hmm. To be a human being, the first thing you have to learn is to be embarrassed. So why do we wear clothes? The conventional wisdom is because when they ate from the tree of knowledge, they matured to where they, like children who know nothing about sex and sin and passions. But when they ate from the tree of knowledge, they matured and they realized that the body can be very sinful. Okay. That can make you blush. But you can go a little bit deeper than that. It wasn't guilt that they felt because they hadn't done anything sexual. There was no mention of that in the story. So why would they suddenly become aware of sexuality or the sinful side of sexuality? I mean, they were still in the Garden of Eden. I mean, that's practically heaven. So it wasn't the third shame, the shame of having committed a sin. So they weren't embarrassed by the fact that they ate from the tree, which was the sin. They were embarrassed that you can have sexual sins. Where did that come from? They were embarrassed by the second type of shame, no borders. And that's true. When they were created in a very innocent state, they had no sense of borders. What is mine? What is yours? What is me? What is not? Once they realize that there are borders, I am not you, you are not me, I don't belong in your space, you don't belong in my space, you got to respect those borders. That's what made them embarrassed. And that's why their immediate reaction was to dress, to draw a border, to put a separation and distinction between me and you. What is private for me is private. It's private for you. You keep private. Recognize the borders. Otherwise, you'll always be hurting each other. You'll always be trespassing, like me too. So we've come full circle. Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge and realized that they're molesting each other by violating each other's borders. It took 5,000 years and we caught up.
Speaking of good news, there's a wonderful retreat coming up, the National Jewish Retreat, run by the JLI, Jewish Learning Institute. It's going to be August 9th through the 14th in the Miami area, in a 5-star hotel, best speakers, best lectures, best classes, best accommodations, and best food. So if you have those 5 days free, or any one of those 5 days free, think about joining us. It's going to be great for body and soul. And there's actually a discount if you put my initials in there, RMF. There's a little discount for those who are already committed, already studying, already interested. Google it, look it up, Jewish Retreat, JLI. And hopefully we'll see you there. If you enjoyed this conversation or this topic, and you're looking for more information, or you want to hear it again from another angle, there's a way to do that. And that is in this book. It's all there. Order it from Amazon. You can read it, reread it, and share it. I want to invite you to join us as VIPs, partners in our work, and join us also for a personal chat with other members of the VIP club. We talk about many things. There's an opportunity to ask, to respond, to make a comment, to meet the other supporters. And together we can really make a difference in Jewish life and in life in general. So join us. It's goodtoknow.org. Log in, call, make contact, and join us with the VIPs.